The driveway was already full when I pulled in, as if they expected a full house without me. I parked by the curb, next to a patch of snow-stained grass, and sat there a moment, hands clenched on the steering wheel. Christmas Eve, again. Same house, same people, same cold smiles dressed in holiday cheer. I stepped onto the porch, greeted by twinkling lights wrapped too tightly around the columns, wreaths placed with military precision. Verona opened the door before I could knock, her smile tight, eyes scanning me like a checklist item. "You made it," she said, stepping aside. Her tone said I'd arrived too early, or maybe too late. I could never get it right. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and roasted meat, but the warmth was only surface deep. Klaus stood by the fireplace, swirling wine in a glass like he was in a movie. He nodded at me, didn't speak. Verona was already adjusting the napkins, flicking invisible lint off placemats. She gestured toward my seat, the one at the far end of the table. Small talk floated like mist over the dining room. Someone commented on the snow. Someone else asked if airports would be crowded. I answered when spoken to, but mostly I just smiled. The kind of smile you wear when your presence is tolerated but never truly welcomed. I'd been here before, in this exact silence. The holiday air always thick with things unsaid. In this house, I was the spare. The extra seat, the added name on a gift tag. Verona had the career, the house, the engagement ring with a rock the size of a quarter. I had stability, I guess. A modest job, no romantic scandals, no children, no chaos. But in their eyes, it translated to nothing worth bragging about. They never knew I spoke German. Picked it up in college. A side hobby that became a quiet part of me. Never mentioned it. Why would I? They barely listened when I spoke English. I used to hope things would shift. That one year they'd notice I was still here, still showing up, still making an effort. But over time, you stop expecting. When people forget you long enough, you start pretending it doesn't matter. Klaus and Verona were in the kitchen when it happened. I was topping off wine glasses. That's when I heard him, low and careless. "Sie sieht aus, als hätte sie sich im Dunkeln angezogen. Ist sie immer so langweilig?" She giggled. "Immer. Ich ignoriere es einfach." I stood frozen, fingers clenched around the bottle's neck. The words clanged in my skull, louder than they were spoken. Klaus's voice, smug and amused. Verona's reply, effortless, like this wasn't the first time. They thought I didn't understand, thought I couldn't possibly grasp their polished little insults, that I was as dull and invisible as they made me feel. I walked back to the table slowly, careful not to spill, smiled as I poured, polite, distant, a hostess in someone else's house. But inside, I was burning. How many holidays had I sat across from her, defending her to others, backing her choices, brushing off her passive jabs as stress or poor timing? How many birthdays had she missed? How many times had I told myself, she means well? All those years I swallowed my words just to keep peace, just to be allowed in the room. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I played the game. I let the rage settle like snow, quiet, cold, and certain. I excused myself briefly, took out my phone in the hallway, and opened the voice memo app. I pressed record and slid it back into my pocket. Not for revenge, not yet. Just insurance. A record. Back at the table, I looked Klaus in the eye and asked, "So, what part of Germany is your family from?" He chuckled, too pleased with himself. "Bavaria. Grew up speaking German. Most Americans can't say that." I smiled. "Isn't that something?" He took the bait, basking in the attention. Arrogance made people sloppy. I let him talk, let Verona preen next to him, let them think I was still the outsider, fumbling through their perfect little holiday. The night wore on, dessert came and went, gifts waited in the living room. As we stood to move, Verona called out, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Can someone get her a book on fashion next year?" Laughter rippled around the table. Klaus smirked. I turned to him, wineglass still in hand, and looked him square in the eye. "Pass auf, wenn du verspottest. Manche von uns verstehen mehr als du denkst." Silence. Every fork stilled. Every mouth froze mid-smirk. Glasses hung in the air. I didn't blink. Fear always hides behind pride, and Verona had both. After I spoke in German, the room stayed frozen for several seconds longer than anyone wanted to admit. Glasses in midair, eyes wide, half smiles suspended like unfinished lies. It was Klaus who finally set his drink down, the soft clink against the glass table louder than expected. Verona recovered first. Of course she did. "Oh, come on," she said, laughing as if it were all one big misunderstanding. "We were just teasing. That's what families do, right?" Klaus gave a tight grin, but the smugness from earlier was gone. He wasn't laughing now. He looked uncertain. I tilted my head, offered no explanation, just poured myself another glass, calm as ever. If you're going to shake the table, make sure you do it without spilling your drink. That's something I've learned. Control isn't loud, it's precise. The silence eventually unraveled into nervous chatter. Someone asked about a new recipe. Someone else commented on the fireplace. I drifted through the small talk like nothing had happened. That rattled them more than any shouting ever could. When it came time for gifts, Verona took center stage like a show host with an audience. She passed boxes with bows, names written in her crisp handwriting. Mine arrived last, folded neatly in pastel wrapping, a polite smile on her lips. "A little something for you," she said. I opened it slowly. A sweater, clearly a size too small. Pale lavender, not my color. Underneath, a high-end cream labeled Age Repair for dull and tired skin. The room chuckled politely. That safe, unsure kind of laughter that says, "We know this is off, but we're not getting involved." I held it up with a smile, meeting her eyes. "So thoughtful," I said, dry as desert wind. She blinked once. The smile twitched. This was classic Verona. Wrap the insult in ribbon and call it affection. I'd seen her do it to others too. Gifts that always hinted at flaws, a gym membership for a cousin, wrinkle serum for an aunt, a cookbook for a friend who once admitted she couldn't bake. She gave from a place of superiority, not generosity. As people began to unwrap their gifts, Verona launched into a story, one that had nothing to do with Christmas and everything to do with me. "I remember when she tried to start that consulting thing," she said, gesturing toward me. "What was it? 2 months before she gave up?" She laughed. "But hey, at least she tried. You know, not everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur." The story was inflated, of course, skewed just enough to make her look composed and me, chaotic. Her voice dripped with kindness, but her eyes watched for cracks. She fed on humiliation, masked as memory. I stayed silent, sipping wine. Let her perform. This wasn't the first time. Family gatherings were her stage. She rewrote history with the ease of someone who believed their own fiction. Her words always carried just enough truth to be dangerous. She didn't just rewrite history, she published it with footnotes and citations. But something had shifted. I began asking questions. To others. The kind that pulled them in. "Joan, didn't you just get back from Portugal? I saw your photos. Those cliffs looked stunning. Mark, how's that new pup? You said he tore up your slippers, right?" Their faces lit up. They leaned in. For the first time, warmth spread around me. Not from Verona's curated environment, but from actual human connection. She watched it happen, saw the spotlight dim around her. Klaus sat quiet, fingers pressed together, studying me now. When you stop feeding their illusion, they start starving for attention. I mentioned, casually, that I'd done some translation work recently. "Just freelance," I said. "A client based in Berlin." Someone asked, "Oh, you speak German?" "A bit," I smiled. "College hobby. Comes in handy sometimes." Klaus didn't speak, but he looked like he wanted to. Even Verona couldn't interrupt without sounding petty. I hadn't bragged. I'd just been honest. And in that room, honesty was beginning to shift the balance. For once, the quiet sister wasn't the blank space in the family portrait. They looked at me differently. Not all at once, but enough to notice. Enough for Verona to feel it. As people gathered coats and leftovers, laughter softer now, Verona cornered me in the hallway. Her grip on my wrist was tight, her nails sharp. "Whatever game you think you're playing," she hissed, "you're not winning." I looked at her calmly. I'm not playing, Verona. I'm remembering. She released my arm, but her eyes, they held something I hadn't seen from her before. Not anger, not control, fear. I woke in the guest room after the dinner. Everything was quiet now, the echo of laughter and wine long gone. The soft hum of the heater, the muted glint of Christmas lights through the curtains. Those small things held me there, in the dark, trembling. I closed the door, shut out the hallway noise, closed my eyes. It was empty, but I felt every absence. I reached for my journal on the nightstand. It's leather-bound, filled with entries I rarely share. I wrote something there even now. If I didn't write it down, I feared I'd forget the worst parts, and that would be more dangerous. That habit from college, when words were my only shelter, kicked in. I unfolded a memory I buried. It came with a sharp ache. Back then, I was 21, thrilled and terrified. I'd applied for a prestigious scholarship to study German language in Germany. It was everything. A chance to grow, to feel worthy. The acceptance letter came. I held it in trembling hands. But Verona found it first. She thought it was junk mail, she said. Careless words that echoed for years. She tossed it aside. By the time I discovered the truth, the deadlines had passed. My chance was gone. She told me, "Hey, let's go to Vermont instead." She hugged me, yes, but that warmth was cold. A consolation prize. I never told anyone. It didn't feel safe. That memory bled into tonight's anger, not because of what was lost, but because it wasn't one screw-up. It was a pattern. All those small jokes, all those compliments wrapped in critique. "I'm only being honest," she'd say, "helping you stay grounded." As if keeping me small was kindness, as if erasure becomes love if it's dressed in holiday lights. I thought of other times, job leads she quietly undercut, promotions overlooked on my behalf while she accepted credit, moments she claimed she forgot to tell me something important. My heart tightened with each image. She didn't just rewrite history. She published invention with footnotes, citations, so convincing no one else questioned the edits. My hands shook. I sifted through old entries in the journal, fingered margins where I noted betrayals. Then I dug deeper. My phone. I had saved the voice memo from dinner, recorded it without thinking. I listened again. The laughter, the words in German, the tone. The realization struck me. Klaus didn't just mock me by mistake. He knew. He expected me to be silent. That was his plan. Their arrogance wasn't ignorance. It was dependability on my compliance. This wasn't just a Christmas dinner, I whispered into the dark. This was a stage, and they were counting on me being the audience. I closed the notebook, exhaled. My breathing steadied. My bones felt lighter. I left the room walking quietly down the hall. My shoes made soft taps on hardwood. I paused outside Verona's door. I pulled out my phone again. There was a message from Klaus, mistakenly sent to the wrong group chat. "She won't say anything. She never has. That's why it's always been easy." I stared at those words, part anger, part pity. I deleted the message, forwarded it to Minerva, my friend, my ally. Proof. Witness. Enough. Then I opened the closet in the guest room. There it was, a plain box labeled, "For when it's enough." I hadn't touched it in years. Inside were letters I never sent, photos I almost threw away, journals I'd expected to burn. But tonight, I realized how much strength lives in preservation. Tomorrow, I won't be the extra at their table. I'll be the one flipping it. After everything in the hallway, the standoff, her threat, my response, I returned to the living room expecting space, maybe quiet. But Verona was already back in full hostess mode, as if none of it happened. She clapped her hands lightly, smiling to the room. "All right, time for our annual Christmas sing-along," she announced, her voice sweet but sharp. "Everyone ready?" There was always a performance. Holiday tradition. Verona had started it back in high school when she discovered she could hold a tune. It was her stage. She just let the rest of us sing background. This year was no different. She held a clipboard, like she was casting a show, assigned solos here and there. When she got to me, her tone softened. "You've got such a warm voice for harmony," she said. "Let's have you support on the background vocals, okay?" I nodded once. That was all I gave her. The room barely noticed. As they set up the small karaoke machine and the lights dimmed, I moved to the side, watching her bask in spotlight. The piano started. Her solo hit. The others clapped politely. I stared at the decorations. My stomach knotted tighter than any bow on those presents. Not because I wanted applause. I wanted fairness. This wasn't just about a song. It was the same thing, over and over. High school, the time I got the lead in the school play, until Verona convinced the teacher I was too shy and she'd be a better fit. Work, the seminar where I prepared a presentation, and she interrupted halfway through with a correction that turned the room. Even holidays like this, she gave expensive gifts that always had a twist, a reminder, a dig. And when I'd hesitate, just trying to help you be your best self. Tonight was no different, but I felt different. Halfway through the second song, it happened. The track I was supposed to sing harmony on started. I stepped up to the mic, opened my mouth. Nothing. The mic was dead. I looked at the tech setup. Everything else was working. Klaus muttered something to Verona. She smirked. Someone behind me whispered, "Poor thing, these glitches always seem to follow her." I froze, my hands clenched. I saw her face, glowing under the lights. She was radiant, effortless. The solo kept going without me. She sang louder. Everyone clapped harder. No one looked at me, except Minerva. Her gaze locked on mine. Subtle, steady. I didn't need saving, but I was no longer willing to be erased. When the song ended, the applause came quick, light, festive, unbothered. I stepped forward, my voice calm but clear. "There was no issue with the mic," I said. Silence. "I know German," I continued, scanning the room. "And I know that's not how you treat family." Gasps. Shuffling. Someone's wine glass clinked on a table. Verona didn't speak. Her eyes narrowed. Klaus looked away. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I didn't perform. I just spoke. That was the difference. Verona finally scoffed. "You always make things about you, don't you?" I said nothing. Henrietta, our cousin, blinked slowly, unsure where to land. Others avoided eye contact. Klaus. He looked like he wanted to disappear. Only Minerva stood with me. No words, just presence. That was enough. My breath was steady, but my pulse raced. I had just tipped the scales. That moment couldn't be undone. Verona stepped closer, her voice low. "You think this is dignified?" she asked. I held her gaze. "I think surviving silence is more degrading than speaking truth." She didn't laugh. Klaus shifted, took a step forward. His face was unreadable. I didn't move. I waited. And that pause, that breathless, waiting pause, held more weight than all the music in the room. After the choir performance, the house took on a strange hush. Not quiet exactly, just strained. People said their goodbyes with awkward hugs and rushed exits. No one lingered near me. I stood near the doorway, thanking guests one by one. I smiled at Minerva, who gave me a look that said more than words could. A few others nodded politely. Folks who noticed something was off, but didn't dare name it. Verona was in the kitchen, scrubbing wine glasses like they had insulted her. The noise wasn't necessary. It was a show. Klaus dried a single dish, standing as far from me as the countertop allowed. They were waiting. I knew it, for me to slink away. For it all to slide back into silence. Not this time. I walked into the kitchen, placed my glass down softly. "We're not doing this in whispers," I said. Verona didn't look up. Klaus froze. "Let's go to the living room," I added. I didn't wait for agreement. I walked, and they followed. That alone shifted the energy. And I stood where the tree lit up half the wall and began. I'm going to say this plainly, and once. Tonight wasn't some isolated thing. It wasn't a bad mic, or a misunderstanding, or a joke gone too far. It was another chapter in a long story I'm done reading. Verona opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. "No, let me finish." I turned to Klaus. "You sent that message. Maybe by mistake, maybe not. But you knew who she was, and you said I'd never speak up. Klaus looked like a child caught cheating. He glanced at Verona, then back at the floor. I went on. You think silence is agreement? It's not. It's survival. And I'm done surviving you. Verona scoffed. God, you're dramatic. That's your line when someone finally tells the truth, I said. She crossed her arms. You twist everything into some kind of attack. I breathed in. Slowly. You've spent your life calling cruelty kindness. You've wrapped your power plays in bows and gifts. You've used love like a leash, and every time I tried to name it, you gaslit me into believing it was just my insecurity. She turned to Klaus. Back me up here. But he didn't. He just rubbed his forehead like the whole thing was a headache he didn't want to own. See? I said. That's silence. That's what you've always counted on, and that's what kept you comfortable. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just let the facts breathe. I won't be at your wedding, I said quietly. Verona blinked. What? Not unless things change. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm demanding decency. She laughed, short and sharp. You'll come. You always come back. I smiled, not warmly. That's what you count on. But maybe it's time I break the pattern. Klaus finally spoke, voice soft. I didn't think you understood German. I looked at him dead on. That wasn't your mistake. Your mistake was thinking I'd never stand up. He shifted uncomfortably, his mask cracking. It wasn't guilt. It was fear. Not of me, but of what it would mean if others believed me. He opened his mouth to say something. I cut in. You don't need to say anything. Just know I've stopped listening. That hit harder than yelling ever could. I reached into my purse, pulled out the wedding invitation Verona had handed me days ago, all shimmer and cursive. I didn't rip it. I didn't crumple it. I just held it out. If things don't change, this doesn't go on my fridge. She took it with a hand that had never shaken before. But now, her fingers weren't steady. I walked toward the front door, my coat already on. As my hand touched the knob, I turned back one last time. Think about what this season is really about. Then I left. Guests filtered out into the cold night air. The warmth of holiday greetings had faded. I thanked Aunt Joan, nodded to Mark, told Minerva good night. The living room felt both larger and emptier now. Verona stood by the sink, water dripping, wiping a wine glass clean with exaggerated care. Klaus hovered near the counter, looking at me as if I held something dangerous. I swallowed, pulled my coat sleeve over my wrist. Tonight, I decide, I won't let another moment get stolen. I walked into the kitchen as Verona paused in the gesture. My voice was calm, steady. We need to talk, now. She looked up, surprise mixed with annoyance. Klaus dropped the towel. They both followed me without words. I led them into the living room, facing the Christmas tree, its lights twinkling like witnesses. I said it plainly. Tonight wasn't just about the mic or one slip. It was another chapter in a story I refused to live. I paused. I watched their faces. I let the weight of silence roll in. Well, you think silence means agreement? It doesn't. It's survival, and I'm done surviving you. Verona opened her mouth. I raised a hand. Klaus flinched. You've built empathy as a leash, I said. You dress control as care. Every gift you've given had its strings. I spoke of years, job gigs, forgotten ideas, missed chances, all because I didn't want to be the sister who complained. She said, voice tight, you twist things, always make it personal. I held steady. This isn't just one night. It's a lifetime of erasure. I won't attend your wedding unless respect is part of it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for basic dignity. Verona sneered. You'll still show up. You always do. I offered no apology. You expect me to always come back? Maybe that's what you count on. But I'm breaking that pattern. Klaus finally spoke. I didn't think you understood German. I stared. That wasn't your mistake. Your mistake was believing I'd never stand up. He hesitated. We both knew what standing up felt like now. Solid, unavoidable. I emphasized quietly. You don't need to say anything. Just know I've stopped listening. Verona stared at me, lips thinning. Then I took the wedding invitation from my purse, light catching the edges. I didn't tear it, I didn't crumple it, just handed it back. If things don't change, this doesn't hang on my fridge. Her hand shook slightly as she took it, eyes buzzing, unsteady. I moved to the door, coat in hand. Kurt ran his chill through my spine. One last look back at the room that once felt like home. Think about what this season is really about, I said. I left. Morning light slipped through heavy curtains. I woke before the sun, leftover tension still buzzing in my chest. The house was quiet, chairs pushed in, lights dimmed, the faint hum of holiday music on a forgotten radio. I lay there, listening to my own heartbeat. Last night's words kept turning over and over. Respect is earned, not borrowed. I remembered Verona's stunned face, Klaus's silence. My throat was raw. My phone buzzed. I read the message. Dietrich's law firm issued an internal statement about the slideshow. A few friends posted comments, disbelief, urging fairness. Some asked if I'd been misquoted. None of it felt like victory, felt like truth finally breathing. Marla appeared in the hallway, hurried and sharp. "You're making this about you again," she said before I could speak. Her voice carried that old claim, exaggeration, self-obsession. Guests saw, whispers followed. I felt betrayal sting, but didn't flinch. I stood firm. "I'm not exaggerating," I said. "I'm pointing out what's real." She crossed arms. Her accusal jumped. "You think you've been wronged. Times like this, you tell everyone you're the victim." She leaned in. "Why can't you just drop it?" I drew breath, my voice quiet, coherent. "This isn't just one night. It's every time I was minimized. Every time I was erased. I'm breaking it." I thought then of the women I admired, those who stood up in rooms where no one would listen, the women who said enough. I remembered something I read years ago. Your story is not worth less just because someone else chose to hide their versions. I glanced around. Henrietta stood off to one side, face soft with regret. Klaus was distant, jaw tight. Minerva gave me a faint nod. I felt their shifts. Then came the backlash. Marla's voice raised, accusing me of twisting kindness into cruelty. "You always make dramas, turn small things into attacks." Her words aimed not to reason, but to wound. She tried to rally others, paint me as the troublemaker. I did not raise my voice. I spoke with clarity. Silence enables cruelty. Passive insults hurt just as loud as shouts. I listed the episodes. The mic muted, the substituted slides, the gifts with tags that weren't mine. Not to get sympathy, but to hold the truth in front of them like a mirror. They looked at me, shocked, someone else could see. Shocked, because I refused to step back. Some of the family members reached out. Texts. "I didn't know that. I wish I believed you sooner." Henrietta's eyes glistened. Klaus's posture shifted. Verona's face paled. I told them, "I pick truth. If that's not family, I'll build new definitions." Marla swallowed. There was no retort she could offer. Her control was leaking. I left the hallway, stepping past the echo of footsteps. I didn't slam the door. I didn't whisper. I just walked, holding my head high. Silence followed me. I sat in the dim light of the formal living room, Lila curled in my lap. The soft glow from the Christmas tree flickered across her face. Outside, snow had begun again, blanketing the world in quiet. Inside, the air felt heavier. My heart was still pounding from last night, the confrontation, the truth spoken, the silence that followed. I held Lila close, watching shadows move across the walls, wondering which ones would fade now. Henrietta appeared carrying a tray with 2 mugs of coffee. Her hands shook. She set one in front of me. The steam rose, but I barely felt warmth. She cleared her throat. "I saw things," she began, voice low. "I watched Verona do things I didn't think mattered, but they did. I felt pressure to stay quiet, to protect peace." She paused, glancing toward Verona, whose figure was steady and distant. "I should have told you years ago. I'm sorry you thought I didn't see." My throat tightened. I looked at her, searching for deception. There was none I could find. She hadn't always been strong, she had just been afraid. I tightened my grip on Lila. Something shifted. The room felt alive with what was true. And in that moment, Lila came forward, clutching a small drawing. She rang the front doorbell despite the house being locked down to guests. Drawing in hand, she looked up at me and said, "For you, Daddy Lazaro." I accepted it, my fingers trembling. I hung it on the family board, one Verona controlled for years, where only curated perfection belonged. My voice rose. Lila chose me tonight. Not because of blood, but because of truth. The gathering stilled. Faces turned. Whispered breaths. Everyone saw. I wasn't just answering insults. I was acting on what I believe. Reuben, Marla's cousin, stepped forward. "I thought Verona did that because she cared," he said. The weight of his words hit. Little murmurs spread among the remaining guests. I looked at him, calm but firm. Caring isn't claiming someone else's credit. Henrietta glanced from Reuben to me, conflicted. I saw recognition in her eyes. Small but real. Even Verona looked rippled, her control slipping in that small, exposed moment. Verona tried to regain control. "You're making too big a deal," she said, voice harsh. I stood, unwavering. "The deal has always been big. You just hid its shape." Klaus spoke quietly, the first time I heard him in this room. "You were always there. I just thought you wanted peace." Henrietta nodded. Some guests leaned in, others met the floor. I felt bitter victory, not triumph, the sorrow of things lost, the cost of being erased. I gathered Lila, her small hand in mine, and looked around at faces that once ignored me. "Home isn't silence anymore," I said. Verona opened her mouth, maybe to deny, deflect, roar back, but I stepped forward. Decision made, my spine straight. I would not shrink. The lines had been drawn. The morning was still. Snow drifted gently against the windows, and the only sound was the slow ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. I sat curled in the corner of the couch, coffee in hand, legs tucked under me. The mug was warm, but my thoughts ran cooler. Still, not numb, just settled. I kept seeing Lila's drawing on the board. I kept hearing Henrietta's cracked voice from the night before, Klaus's hesitation, Verona's silence. All of it churned, but no longer like a storm, more like waves, receding. I used to think peace came from avoiding conflict, but maybe peace only shows up once truth walks in the room first. Aunt Meredith stepped in, wrapped in an old blue cardigan that smelled faintly of cinnamon and something older. She didn't speak at first, just sat next to me and reached for my hand. Her grip was firm. "You remind me of me when I was younger," she finally said. Back then, I swallowed my words so deep they started to taste like me. I let her speak. She told me about the things she let slide, the small humiliations that built into a life she didn't quite choose. She paused. "You spoke when it cost something. That's not weakness. That's legacy." We sat with that. She smiled, thin but genuine. "I've decided to revise my will," she said quietly, almost like she was sharing a recipe. "Lila deserves a place in this family's future, whether Verona likes it or not." That hit me deeper than I expected, not because of money, because someone saw Lila not as an afterthought, but as someone worthy, seen. Verona was already halfway down the stairs, a suitcase in her hand. No words, no announcement, just presence, then absence. Henrietta stood nearby, lips pressed tight, not interfering. She didn't stop her, just watched. And I did too. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to stop anything either. Verona's silence wasn't surrender. Oh, and it was space. And it belonged to her. No one followed her. Klaus lingered behind her, eyes darting between me and the hallway. Eventually, he stepped into the room. "I don't know how to fix what I've done," he said. His voice didn't wobble, but his eyes did. "It's not about fixing," I said. "It's about showing up differently, from now on." He nodded and asked, barely above a whisper, "Can I be in her life? No performance, no titles, just be there. I looked at him for a long second, then nodded. Truthfully, genuinely, that's the only way forward. Henrietta came up beside me, gently placed her hand on my shoulder. I looked up. Mom, I said. Just once. It was enough. We didn't need to unwrap the whole mess that was our history. We could start here, a small breakfast, a walk, no speeches, just presence. Later, I sat with Lila by the window and talked to her about everything, about people, about love, about truth. She listened with big, round eyes, fingers tracing the steam on the glass. You're never alone, I told her. We don't get to choose how we enter a story, baby, but we get to shape how it ends. She didn't say anything. She just leaned into me and whispered, I'm glad you're my story. The day unfolded gently. Guests trickled out, some with nods, others with quiet hugs. No longer cold, no longer pretending. Henrietta kissed Lila's forehead on the way out. Aunt Meredith leaned in, voice barely above breath. Keep being the storm when needed. After everyone left, I cleaned the kitchen slowly, letting the quiet sink in. I passed the board in the hallway. Lila's drawing still hung there. Bright. Unapologetic. It would stay there.